The shortest month of the year is currently also the shortest list of projects for me to review, and also the so-called month of love, surprisingly, offers a decent amount of love and romance. Guess love really is in the air. But outside of the romantic comedies and the usual Valentine's Day garbage, there was a few things to look forward to. February is always a smaller month, given that it tends to be where movies go to die, much like January, but it has been pretty good, I will say. Not quite as good as what the rest of the year is offering. It's still blockbuster hell, but not quite as bad as previous years have been for this particular time of year. February was a slow month for me, which gave me plenty of time to enjoy the media presented to me this month. I had a lot of fun with this movie. It didn't have any massive consequences for the MCU, and it didn't need to. It was just a really fun movie. And it was a strong return to the old Captain America style of movies, with how grounded it was, its political messaging, its realism to a degree, and how its fights were a lot more hand to hand than, well, literally every other MCU movie. And those fight scenes were impressive. There are some great action set pieces and choreography. Sam having his own way of fighting leads to some really cool moves, and those flying scenes, some of the best I have seen in a while. This is some Iron Man level, Top Gun level stuff, but with a different twist to showcase how Sam and the wingsuits work. The set piece around the Celestial Isle was amazing, some of the best of Marvel. And speaking of Celestial Isle, we have confirmation of Adamantium, ladies and gentlemen, meaning Wolverine is coming in the MCU. But seriously, finally answering that question, or at least acknowledging it, was so refreshing. As for the characters, Sam continues to grow beyond the goofy side character he was in the Infinity Saga, developing a lot more depth. New Falcon is a great addition and a really good side companion to Sam. Isaiah Bradley continues to be a tragic character that you cannot help but feel for in this movie. Harrison Ford is also very good in this movie. Though Red Hulk needed a little more screen time, as for the villain, the leader was another strong Captain America villain, with the way he went about completing his goal. Not only that, but the design was impressive and really, really cool in that it looked like really, really freaky. This movie did not need to be anything more than a return to Captain America movies, and a fun action movie, which it was. It didn't need to be complicated, its plot was nicely wrapped up, it kept pace, it stuck to its boundaries, and it did what it needed to do. It may be early in the year, only two projects in the massive 2025 slate that has been released so far, but Marvel are holding strong in my opinion. Captain America was a good appetizer for the rest of the year. It was really fun. I had a really good time. We hit the first disappointment of the year. Kihei Kwan is a very fun actor. In the works I have seen him in, he is very clearly very, very talented and a very nice man, but that didn't stop the chemistry in this movie feeling off, especially given that the plot of this movie revolves around the cast getting along. He is certainly very good in this movie, as are the fight scenes, of course, but there are a few things missing from this movie. Like, one, a decently cohesive plot. Two, a slightly more original plot, as there are so many ways you can dress up generic action plots. Three, more chemistry between the main cast. Those issues are hard to ignore, as it makes the movie really boring. The cardinal sin for action movies, generic is okay as long as it is at least entertaining, and cool fight scenes are not enough to make up for that. The villain was also a bit generic, classic rich guy brother who betrayed his family. I want more interesting action villains, which may be a big ask, but it's not hard to make a villain have at least a little more personality and humanity. Love Hurts had a lot of potential to be something different than the normal spiel of action movies we get in a year, but it failed to hit beyond the normal tropes of the genre and make its concept shine beyond relying heavily on its star power, which is a lot. I have nothing against Kihei Kwan in this movie, but it failed to make itself interesting beyond that.
Graced a ride along with Geralt of Rivia. Along came this song. When the White Wolf fought a silver-tongued.
My first entry into the world of The Witcher was an interesting one. This is based on one of the short stories, which I haven't read, and I have heard it's not faithful, especially as it portrays Yennefer as her TV counterpart, as opposed to her one in the books. However, Geralt is still a great protagonist, with the voice actor from the games returning. Jaskier is a very good side character. Not quite comic relief, but certainly a lot lighter than Geralt, which creates a nice balance. The plot happening because two parents couldn't bear to see their children happy is really dumb, but at least the king got his comeuppance. The animation is still very dynamic, with Geralt doing all sorts of crazy stunts. The new character, whose name I can't remember, did not need to be in this movie. If she was in the book, okay, but otherwise, I don't know how she really didn't do anything other than be a new love interest for Geralt and be a translator. Her accent was fine, though. I actually quite liked it. Anytime there's a variation on the classic British accent, and the animation served a lot of creature designs, which were all very unique and interesting to see, but I would have liked a little more variation, especially amongst the fish people. As a movie on its own, as a fantasy story, it's pretty good. Decent amount of world building without dumping exposition, well paced, well animated, and with some good action scenes and some decent character moments. As a book adaptation, I cannot say. So I'll leave that to those that have read the books, and even then it'll be very divisive. I liked this movie. It had a lot going for it and had a lot of cool features. There was just something about this story and some of the elements of the movie that did not quite reach a high bar. However, I have broken down the barrier to a flood of Witcher content now, so I look forward to seeing what this series has to offer in the future. I am not someone who is a fan of horror, but I have found myself in the last year or so slowly getting more into it, as I have with anime. And this movie was my first true horror movie. I saw it with a bunch of uni friends and was pleasantly and greatly surprised by how good this movie was. I think a big reason for that was that it was more campy comedic horror than straight up thriller horror, which is the kind of horror I like more than most. This movie was so funny at so many places. I was constantly laughing and cracking jokes with my friends. The campiness of this movie added some good horror vibes, as well as creating some really funny as well as brutal deaths. The harpoon one was easily the worst. The characters were very, very entertaining. The twins were the best parts, as was Tatiana. And hey, Stephen King cameos at the end. What also surprised me about this movie was how many emotional moments it had and how genuinely impactful it was, especially the funeral scenes. However, I must also talk about that damn creepy monkey that traumatized me in Toy Story 3 and did exactly what it was supposed to: bring a terrifying, creepy, and traumatizing force of nature to send the plot into overdrive. My experience of horror made me want to dislike this movie, but it did all the right things to make it thoroughly enjoyable, and I have a really really good time watching it. And whilst I'm not fully on board with horror, I'm certainly on the right track to get more into the genre in the future, especially since I now have friends really into horror. But I really liked this movie. It was comedic, funny, horrifying in places, and surprisingly emotional. One thing I disliked was the bullying of the main character, mostly out of personal reasons, but it's always hard to watch and hits way too close to home. But I was able to look past that to really enjoy this movie.
Shot like a rocket up into the sky. Nothing can stop me tonight. You make me feel invincible. Just like a tidal wave. You make me brave. Night, titanium. Fight some ways.
This is easily the best season of this show so far. Invincible has come such a long way, both the show and the character, and it was good to see them learning lessons from the previous seasons. The animation looked fine for most of the season, and saving the animation and the budget for the end was worth it because, my word, those last few episodes were insane, and some of the best and most brutal fight scenes of the show so far, and this is saying a lot. Stephen Yeun, among many other the voice actors, continued to be fantastic and supremely talented. Aaron Paul's work with Powerplex was equally as impressive, and the way he was able to sound so tortured, broken, and sad all at the same time. The battle between Cecil and Mark was very, very well done, and it is a credit to how hard it is to pick sides given how right they both were, and also how wrong they both were. I also like the divide it created within the Guardians, showcasing the battle between generations, the Immortal and Kate continuing to be dicks, and just adding way many more layers to the conflict that really helped sell how important it was. However, I am siding with Cecil more because Mark seems very out of touch with the situation, and also, Cecil has a point that is proven in the final two episodes. Conquest and Jeffrey Dean Morgan were terrifying and brutal, and I was on edge so much throughout that final episode. They also turned up the brutality again somehow because there were so many very, very traumatizing hits. The relationship between Adam, Eve, and Mark finally happened, was good, and they are a great couple. Its existence just meant that a lot of Mark and Amber's storyline from the previous two seasons was not very well done, and it felt kind of wasted, but we are past that now, and on to what really matters. Also, Rex has one of the best redemption and character arcs, because I really felt for him, and grew to love him, and like Gambit, he went out like a boss, and will be sorely missed. On top of that, there was a lot more emotion I felt put into this season, with the relationship between Rex and Ray, Mark and Eve, the Grayson family, Rudy/Rex and Amber, the relationships between the Guardians were all very intimate and well written, and they add so much layers to this story that really is about the characters more than it is about superheroes punching each other, as well as really helping these groups feel much more connected and realistic with how they react and respond to the world and the devastation and the role they play in it. Invincible is a highlight of superhero media, and I continue to love it, and I'm psyched for where the story goes next because it somehow gets even worse. Pixar pulling out the emotional storytelling again for another wonderful little series. Win or Lose combined Pixar's usual skill for emotional storytelling with various stories of the kids, looking into some very real and very relatable issues ranging from self-doubt to loneliness to struggling with being yourself. All real things kids go through and presented in very meaningful, very emotional, and very respectful ways, culminating in a final episode that does a lot of work to resolve these issues. As well as its emotional storytelling, Pixar utilized a new, unique style of animation, coupled with some extra stylistic flair across individual episodes, to really get into the heads of both the individual characters with how they perceive the world, and also to add some more stylistic flair to this world. I was not expecting the show to hit as hard as it did in some places, but that is part of Pixar's strength with emotional storytelling in this series. How every kid, how all these kids are going through these things that feel so relatable and heartbreaking, especially before we see through the eyes of the parents at what's going on. Seeing these kids make mistakes, make stupid decisions, suffer through relatable issues that make this show so much better than what I initially thought. I related to almost all of the struggles of these characters in different ways, and I occasionally got teary-eyed at watching this show. But the finale did a good job of giving them a satisfying and emotionally cathartic conclusion amidst all the heavily stylized chaos. And I appreciate that they didn't go full happy ending with the team not showing whether the team won the championship or not, because I think that would have taken away from some of the emotional catharsis and not stuck with the overall message of the show in quite the same way as the rest of the episodes have. And what is this message? Well, the message is about yourself, being the best version of yourself, supporting yourself, standing up for yourself. It's about how our sense of self, is affected by the world around us, by our situation, by our family, by parental pressure, by the decisions and mistakes we make in life. And it was really interesting to see these different interpretations throughout the series. I really liked this series, if you can't tell, and did not expect it to be as impactful and emotional as this. Another example of Pixar's mastery over emotional storytelling, as well as another successful series. I hope Pixar does more in the future, because this and Dream Productions have proven they have the talent for it. 2025 has gotten off to a great start, and it can only go up from here, I hope. The year may be starting slow, but don't worry, the next few months are chock full of media for me to consume. February is so often a month of lesser work. It was so good to see it contain some real quality work this time. Work that has got me excited for the rest of the year can offer if this is what the opening of the year is offering us already.